Welcome to another episode of Equity Mates, a podcast where we explore what's possible in the world of investing. If you've just joined us for the very first time, a huge welcome. We have a great episode for you today. My name is Bryce, and as always, I'm joined by my equity buddy, Ren. How are you going?
I'm very good, Bryce. Very excited for this episode. We are back with another Ask an Advisor episode. In these episodes, we get some of Australia's best financial advisors in the room and we put your questions to them. And today we are talking all about the intergenerational wealth transfer. It's going to be one of the biggest movements of money, biggest movements of wealth. I didn't want to use wealth given that it's in the title.
It's going to be the biggest wealth transfer we've ever seen.
But it's going to be massive. It's going to have profound impacts across Australia and across the Western world. But we're not going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what it means for us as individuals and how we can best navigate this moment. And to do it, we're joined by a returning favourite, king of the case study. We make him work hard when he comes in here. Study. And don't worry, he's got a case study once again. Dylan Pargiter-Green, welcome back to the show.
Good to be here, and thank you for getting my name right. You absolutely nailed it.
I was a bit nervous. That run-up maybe had a little bit of extra
extra mayo.
Am I going to get this right?
Practicing in the mirror this morning.
Now, Dylan works with a number of the Equity Mates community. If you are listening to this and you would like to speak to Dylan, his team, or any of our other handpicked advisors, head to equitymates.com/advice. There's a form there that you can fill in and we'll make sure that you get put in touch with Dylan because you are doing some awesome work with a lot of our community at the moment.
Absolutely. Yeah. Lots of legends.
And we should, that's good to hear. Yeah. And we should say for people who are unfamiliar with Dylan and some of the past episodes, you've done case studies on debt recycling.
Yes.
You've done case studies on the most tax efficient
TTRs.
way to invest between super and outside of super. There was another one that I can't remember.
Retirement strategies.
Retirement strategies. So we'll include links to Dylan's previous case studies in the show notes and YouTube description, so you can download those and see some of his work. This time you've modeled school fees for us.
Yeah.
So we'll get to that throughout the episode. But let's start by setting the scene. Intergenerational wealth transfer. I explained it as one of the big movements of money we've ever seen.
The wild migration.
Explain it to us.
One of those big money movements.
Explain it to us in a more succinct way and maybe give us some of the stats behind it.
100%. Like, it is the big movement of money that's going to happen. And it's happening all around the world. We're probably 20 or 30 years behind, say, America or Europe because we've had lesser history. But in terms of wealth, compared to the timeline of those countries or continents, we're not that far behind. In Australia, over the next 30 years, there's about $5 to $6 trillion of wealth that's going to be transferred. And for like context, that's about 2.5 to 3 times what Australia's GDP is. That's like incredible amount of money that's being passed. And if you work it out, it's $150 billion a year is passed currently every single year. That's increasing in inheritances, right? So money going from one family member to multiple others or one. So it's a massive number. And it's unfortunately not very well dealt with by most people in Australia.
Well, just on that, like you're speaking to a lot of Equity Mates community members. You also work with people sort of going through the retirement planning phase and into retirement. How prepared do you feel we are as a generation to have these conversations and plan for this massive migration of money?
Not well. So we often tell clients they need to get a will, right? Really simple. You need to have a will, particularly if you've got kids or you've got multiple generations. So many people in Australia don't. Now, you would think that that's like a pretty obvious thing, but still, like 60% of people, regardless of whether or not they have a will or not, will get a lawyer to engage in planning or what happens when they're estate. So if there's a will or there's not a will, you still get a lawyer involved to help with probate and these sorts of things. Only 20% of people will get a financial advisor involved in understanding where their assets should go and what the consequences of those assets. So 1 in 5 people that pass away, or on that stat before, $120 billion a year, is not being dealt with in the most financially efficient way.
Wow.
It's incredible.
Yeah, it is. I got a will recently. Just want to shout out, I used Willed I think we have an offer code for them. You can go to equitymates.com/advice and get the details there. But I now have a will. My wife gets everything.
So she should. No, but like online services like that, interestingly enough, had a look on it when you guys put it out in your email. And things like that, it is so simple. Regardless of whether it's through them, you can go to the post office and get a $20 will kit or $40 will kit or whatever it's called, or you can go and sit down with a lawyer if you really want to understand it. But that's just step one, right? Like understanding where everything goes. Often the case is, like if Alice inherited everything that you own, she doesn't know how your weird crypto portfolio works. Right? Like making the decision on what she sells and how she holds those assets and what things that she should have in that portfolio and how that maintains, for her as an asset is a lot more complicated than just, oh, cool, she's going to get it all.
Yeah.
So it's something that needs to be spoken about. It's an awkward conversation to have. It's even more awkward when you're trying to have it with your parents.
Yeah.
Or even as a parent, like a lot of our older clients will have trouble bringing it up with their kids, talking about their own mortality, talking about that passing on of their assets that they've worked really hard for.
Off the back of our last Ask an Advisor we did with you, which was the case study on the transition to retirement and the whole shifting the cash so that pre-contribution so that when your parents pass and you get the superannuation, it's tax effective. I was like, my parents should be thinking about this, but I found it difficult to bring it up with them because it's super greedy. It's just like...
It is. Why don't you just send them the podcast?
Nah, it's because that's even like...
Print the case study and just put it in the mailbox.
Mr. and Mrs. Anne Lescure.
Send them the link and say, here's a way you can save tax legally. And then we should...
But they're not saving tax. It saves tax for us.
Oh, it's all I'm saying. It's keeping the family.
But the point was, I can imagine how difficult it is for people to have these conversations.
It is. Yeah. It's interesting as well, though. Like if you look at some of Australia's wealthiest families and the journey that they go on in terms of the intergenerational wealth and the planning that goes on behind it, it's embedded in their entire process, right? So everything that a private office is doing is thinking about the children, the grandchildren, the next generation, and there is no reason why, with this amount of money that's being transferred by not the super wealthy, but everyday Australians, right, that we shouldn't also be having those conversations because it's only going to create a further wealth gap if we don't have these conversations.
Yeah, I think that's probably something we haven't stressed, but it is worth stressing now that like the majority of people listening will benefit from this conversation. It's not just for people with, like hundreds of millions of dollars or something like that. These days, essentially, like if you own a home in Australia, this conversation is probably relevant to your family.
100%. Yeah.
So we want to talk about how parents and grandparents can think about it. We also want to talk about how kids can think about it. But I think before then, let's talk about how this conversation can actually start because, it is awkward to talk about money. What was the old saying? Money, politics, and religion, the three things you don't talk about at the dinner table. Bryce can't talk about it with his family, and yet he talks about money on a podcast for a living and has been doing it for 8 years. If he can't do it, what hope do the rest of us have?
Well, we did talk about it, but it was just awkward to start. It was just an awkward conversation.
So as an advisor, you often play like part financial expert, part like family therapist / psychologist. So how do you find it is best to facilitate and start these conversations?
I think you have to be really practical. You have to help guide the conversation in a way where you're saying, hey, mum and dad, if you haven't spoken to somebody about where you're at in your financial life, maybe you should. And that's basically saying, first off, get your own house in order because people who are going through that transition to retirement really... a lot of people aren't aware of what their situation is, how much money they should be spending, could be spending, what they can do. And then always remember, particularly if you're a younger person going to your parents, or even a middle-aged or an older person who's going to an elder person thinking about that legacy coming around a little bit sooner, you've got to remember that they want you to be better off. Right. So always have in the back of your mind that there's a desire for you to have a positive outcome from whatever they leave you. They don't work all their life to then go, I'm giving it all to, whoever, Barry down the street. So in the back of your mind, when you have these conversations, be open and honest with yourself that your parents love you, hopefully, and they want to have it better off. I mean, when we bring up recontribution, it's a great example, right? Like parents are like, oh my God, how good's that? I can give. I mean, most of the time I don't want to give the government any more money than what I have throughout my entire life. They probably think about not paying tax before they do the benefit to the kids. But at the end of the day, that's what those strategies are for. I think the flip side is, and you know, for anyone that is listening that does have kids and is maybe getting to that stage in their life, like think about the things that you can do for them that will create impact and things that you want to see them enjoy and be comfortable and happy, and have the conversation with them. Like bring it up with your kids. Hey, this is what the position looks like when I'm 30 years from now, 40 years from now, and no longer around. This is what I've done to build up my wealth. I want to pass on some of those values and make sure that the legacy is there and not just taken down to Crown Casino and you know, or put into your sports bet account or whatever your vice is.
What's the right time, do you think, to have that conversation?
The earlier the better. Like if you wait until somebody's unwell, the longer you wait and the less planned something like that is, the more likely it is that you're going to seem like you're chasing whatever assets that are there.
Yeah.
As a counsellor type advisor, having those conversations earlier means that you've got time to work through them. Whereas having them later, not that you're necessarily going to run out of time, but it actually creates this point of tension. Whereas if there is any, not conflict, but if there is any confusion or there is conflict within the family, it's a lot harder to deal with the less time that you've got available.
Yeah.
It's a really good conversation to have. For anyone that already has an advisor, all I'd say is to them, do you mind if I bring my kids in? Or if you're a younger person, do you mind if I bring my parents in just to understand what we're doing? Because your advisor's not going to say no to you to bringing those people in, and you never know what's going to come out of it.
All right, so let's go side by side. Maybe let's start with parents and retirees and how they should be thinking about navigating this wealth transfer and I guess doing the best for their kids. What are some of the most common mistakes you see when clients try to help their kids or their grandkids financially?
There's a few. One really common one is clients taking money and gifting it to their kids during a time where they have or they are about to have an age pension entitlement. So there's a gifting limit, $10,000 per year, $30,000 over a 5-year period. If you give above that, it starts to count. That asset remains. So a lot of people will go, okay, well, I'm 70, you know, I've got more superannuation than I need. And if I get rid of a few $100,000 of it, I'm going to get the pension. It doesn't work like that. Centrelink will count that money for the next 5 years. And so if you will eat into a lot more of your superannuation balance because you won't have the return to top up your income, and you won't get the pension until that 5-year time has gone past. So that's a really common one we see.
And the best way to mitigate that is gift early?
Gift early, yeah.
Gift early. So if you've got access to whatever that asset is prior to the point where you're going to get the age pension, like a lot of people will give a lot of...
If it's in your super, you can't really do it.
Yeah, if you're not working and you're 60...
Oh, yeah, okay.
And if you finish work at that point, that's one way. But other ways of doing it is like, you know, move assets into structures where you can distribute discretionally. So if you build your wealth in a trust, the income no longer has to come to you. It's completely discretionary, and you can remove yourself as a beneficiary from that trust at retirement if you want, and those assets can then be passed to the kid. That it's you know, it's a little bit more complicated than that, and we don't have time in a podcast to do that. But
that's why you go to equitymates.com/advice and speak to Dylan.
Yeah, have a bit more of a longer meeting. But things like trusts are really good for those sorts of things.
So that was one mistake. Were there any others that you see regularly?
Yeah, uneven gifts is another one. So one child receiving something early, and then it being said, oh, don't worry, it'll all balance out in the will. And like very often it doesn't. For example, a client moves into an investment property, and they just say, you can have that property in the will, right? But you also get to use it for the years up to that. You might not pay a mortgage, or you might pay a very low mortgage compared to, you know, child B, who is building up a deposit, buying their own home, paying a big mortgage. So not only is there a discrepancy throughout the life, but if the person then doesn't have the assets to make up for the difference in value that property's grown by, say, for example, you bought a house in 2005 in Sydney, and that person then lived in it for 20 years, and then now that person's passed away. Well, that property's worth a hell of a lot more than what was gifted to them, but maybe the gift in the will, what's left over otherwise, is not enough to compensate for the fact that they got that asset. So uneven gifting is really challenging, And it's a good thing to do, right? Like you should have the ability to give assets to your children forward, but just be conscious that you don't want that to then come back and bite them when you've passed away. It needs to be properly written instruction.
Yeah, I mean, how do you solve for that? Because like the other big one is like family farms and stuff like that, where like just like the bulk of the estate is like one asset that they don't want to sell. It's like
all the kids have to live in the house they gift.
The dream.
In your example, it's like, you know, people have built a life in this house for 20 years and then they don't want to sell it to evenly distribute the assets. Like you're saying, it's a common mistake, but is it a solvable one?
I mean, the farm's an interesting one, and every case is obviously different, which is why it's a really good conversation to have. You may not get it perfect, but 95% is a lot better than like completely wrong. You know, like you know, people are generally going to be happy if it's close enough, and they might squabble over a few $1,000s here or there. If you don't do things and it ends up being hundreds of thousands of dollars, then that's a big amount of difference that it makes, and that's where, you know, the family homes are excellent asset to use, or the family farm in that case, where it could be worth millions of dollars, and you know, one person wants to live there, but they probably can't. I mean, maybe they can, but probably can't afford to pay out the other members of the household, and it's an ongoing thing. So it's like a process of financial mediation in some cases. But again, if you bring that up 40 years before you pass away, or 50 years before you pass away, and you say, hey, I really want all of you to keep this farm, you're probably going to have a much easier conversation between the kids. It's like, oh, mum and dad want us to keep this asset, so we're going to do it, and it's not considered as cash.
So Dylan, you mentioned gifting earlier in this conversation, and I think as we've been speaking about this episode, that's probably one of the simplest but one of the most powerful things that parents and grandparents can think about doing. And I guess the starting point is gifting generally, like just giving money to a child or a grandchild. Like, are there any things people should be thinking about, any tax implications for just giving money?
Well, if it's post-tax money that you're gifting, there's no tax implications of the person receiving the money. You know, if we're talking cash that has been earned, taxed, and then now is sitting in a bank, there's no tax implications. Similarly, if you're drawing on like an account-based pension, so superannuation post-retirement, there's also no tax consequences of drawing that money out and giving it to someone else. The only consequences would come on things like age pension, which I mentioned before.
When it comes to giving assets, like giving houses and shares and stuff, that's when there's tax implications.
So that's a little bit different, because you can't gift an asset without creating a stamp duty event or a change of ownership event. So stamp duty event in the event of a house, and that's also a capital gains event. So, I mean, it's not really beneficial for you to gift shares without passing away. Because that's a change of ownership that's allowable without actually selling down, realizing the capital gains at the time of death, and then owning them. So you can carry on owning shares in perpetuity, and you only have to pay the capital gains when you pass away.
When you sell,
right? When you sell, not when you pass away.
Yeah. What are some of the most common like gifting reasons, or like where do you see gifting happen with your clients?
There's two main ones. House deposit is a pretty
Classic.
Clear cut.
Bank of mum and dad.
Yeah, absolutely. Bank of mum and dad. Even if it's not cash, the use of bank of mum and dad as a guarantor. There is many people that don't utilize that as a strategy, where mum and dad are living in a $2 million or a $3 million house, and it's just sitting there as unused equity. Like, if you haven't spoken to your parents and you're struggling to get a house deposit, at least speak to them about guarantor. Awesome idea.
Another one, just housing related, before you jump into the second one, is I've heard of a strategy where parents who have cash that they're going to need to draw on retirement, they're not ready to gift it. They need that money. When their children get a mortgage, the parents put their cash that they're going to need at some point in the child's offset account. And like, with the knowledge that at some point they're going to need that money and to draw on it. But in the interim, they may as well help their kids save on interest.
Yeah.
Have you seen that?
I have seen it. I would argue that those parents are better off utilising their own assets to build that up more at a rate that's faster than what the kid's saving on the mortgage.
It also wouldn't help the kid with like borrowing capacity or anything.
No. You have to have the mortgage, but it's like, all right, well, I've got this cash. It's just sitting there. I need it at some point, so I can't give it to you, but I can help you out in the interim.
God, the day they ask for it back would be
Hopefully you've smashed your mortgage by then.
Like, it is a strategy. It's probably not the best, but it is something that we've seen. Yeah.
Well, that's why we ask you these questions. Okay, so one is the bank of mum and dad and housing, and then what was the other reason?
Education. Education is particularly private education, but to some degrees, even just helping with the cost of other things around public education or, Catholic or religious education schools. The cost of education is enormous in Australia, and we have an amazing education system, but it is a huge drag at that stage in your life, which is usually, your 40s through to maybe your early 50s, where a large amount of your after-tax money is going to paying school fees. It's incredible. Like Metro Sydney, I think, is like incredibly expensive, but some schools are $35,000, $40,000, $45,000 a year after tax. So that could be $85,000, $90,000 a year that you have to earn to pay 1 year of one child's school fees.
It's crazy.
54% of people that send their kids to private schools say that they have some sort of financial assistance from not necessarily a grandparent or a parent or a family member, but someone is helping with the funding of that in some way. And that's like 54% is a large amount of those people. It's also very inflationary for school fees.
True. So Dylan, you said one of the ways that you can avoid some of the mistake there of is gifting early. And Ren said in the intro that you are the king of the case study. So you've brought a case study. You've brought a case study today that sort of illustrates this, where you have a grandparent who wants to gift $180,000 to go towards a grandchild's education.
Yeah, so probably to frame it slightly differently, we've taken a common scenario of where a grandparent is willing to pay for one child's or the first child's education. What will often happen is that, you'll have a grandparent in this case might have several children, let's say 3, and then they all might have 2 kids each. And as a result, funding 6 people's private school education might be too much, but they'll say, okay, well, each of my children, I'm going to fund one child's education. So this is sort of the flow on of the case study. When you phrase it like that, it's not a $180,000 gift, right? That's just what we've ended up telling the client in this case to do. But to the grandparent, they're not thinking about the amount of money. They in this case have the money there to gift to them, and it's not affecting them in other ways financially. The beautiful thing about that is, rather than a grandparent who maybe is a little bit more conservative at that stage in life, not necessarily wanting to take as much market exposure and wanting to sort of hang on to that money so that they can gift it at the appropriate time, the conversation that we then have with the client who receives the money in this case is, well, you've got sort of 8 or 9 years before your son or daughter reaches high school when you want to start paying for that. Imagine what 8 or 9 years of market returns could do to that money, and perhaps there's a really nice way of funding 2 kids for the price of 1.
And so what you're saying is you get the grandparents to bring forward the cash, gift the 180K, and then you invest it.
That's right, yeah. And at the end of the day, it's just simple compounding, right? So there are tools that you can use for this. You can use an education bond. You can just use ETFs or a managed fund. You can use whatever you like, as long as it's diversified. It's hitting that sort of 7 or 8% year on year. Your calculations are going to come up to give you the outcome that you're seeking. But instead of holding that in cash, acknowledging that that's not really doing much more than inflation, and then gifting it on a yearly basis once that child reaches that age, the parents now have the ability of knowing that they don't also have to fund their second child's education as well. And that then gives them more freedom to save and do other things and grow their wealth in other ways.
So let's just put some specifics to it, Dylan. You've run the numbers, you've built the case study. We'll attach this to the episode show notes so everyone can have a look. But you're effectively taking the $180,000, investing it at market average, which is an 8% per year return.
Conservative.
Very conservative.
Balanced fund.
Conservative. We're saying that child 1 starts year 7 in year 8 8 of the investment, and child 2 starts year 7 in year 10 of the investment.
The other way to phrase that would be this time the children are 5 and 3.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Each child is at school for 6 years through high school, and school fees are $30,000 per year. Probably also conservative given school fee prices in Sydney.
Yeah, I mean, they could be in Wagga.
Oh, you're not paying $30,000 in Wagga. Hell no.
Is there a private school in Wagga? Surely. That would be a Catholic school.
Yeah, but it's like $3,000.
I bet you it's more than $3,000.
I doubt it. I would be surprised.
Right, you run through this scenario.
For context, Metro Sydney is the most expensive area in the country for private school. And to send, this is as of 2024, but to send a child through independent school education is what it's called. So it's an average across all private schools or non-government schools and non-Catholic schools as well, or non-religious schools. The total cost prep through year 12 is $411,000.
Prep, but who's going prep to year 12? Oh, I mean, people
It happens,
sure.
yeah.
There are private primary schools, Ren. They exist.
That's wild.
Well,
That's
hold on,
wild.
but I've just done the math. So 411,000 divided by 13, K till 12.
Yeah.
But the K is not 30,000. It like drastically.
It increases, but
I'm just saying the average there is 31,600.
There you
That's
go.
wild.
Yeah.
So I'm saying your scenario isn't too far off.
Yeah, well, there you go.
Anyway,
Yeah.
we're getting sidetracked. So for the first 7 years, that $180,000, instead of sitting in grandpa and grandpa's account, is being invested and is compounding from $180,000 through to $333,000, including dividends.
Yes.
Then we start drawing down from that for school fees. So we're taking $30,000 and then it gets up to $60,000 a year once the kids start going together. And that happens for sort of the remaining 6 years, as we said. The good thing is, though, Dylan, is it looks like at the end of the school years, when the kids have finished, there's still a residual amount left of $151,000 in cash once all school fees are paid that can be split between the two kids.
Or the grandparents take it back on going a cruise.
The grandparents, if they're still around 16 years after this strategy is still there and want to go on sit on a ship.
And so I guess the conversation you've had by showing your clients this is that by bringing forward the gifting to now, you're not only paying for 2 kids' education, but you're also then leaving them with a nest egg at 21 years old of $75,000 each.
Yeah, I mean, in this case, we had the conversation with a client about wanting to give a starting balance to their kids, but at the same time, like Ren said, the grandparents could take it back, the parents could use it, it could be used for a whole number of things. And of course, this is you're building into a year-on-year exact return assumption, all those sorts of things to get to that final number. But we like to talk about these strategies as like it's the simplest version of planning. You're putting money away that you need to spend later, and effectively you're increasing the amount that you don't have to spend. And in this case, you're basically taking $180,000 and getting $330,000 for free because it only costs you $30,000 at the end. You're left with $150,000.
So to close it out, I know everyone's been waiting on the edge of their seats. I've looked up Wagga school fees.
Oh yeah, which school? Which school?
I've got 2 for you.
Anglican?
First one is St. Mary MacKillop School.
Bro, I don't think that exists anymore.
Well,
The school fees were 44 pence.
well, their website certainly exists, and Google certainly thinks they charge school fees.
Okay.
You're a bit distracted by their website.
Yeah,
now,
I've never heard of it.
So, look, you were right. Years 7 to 12 are $3,520. But that's a Catholic school. What about Wagga Wagga Christian School?
It'd probably be a little bit more expensive.
But that exists?
That exists, yeah.
So that's $7,773 for senior school. But here's an interesting one. Second child, you get a 15% discount. Third child, you get a 30% discount. 4th child and beyond. Free.
It pays to live regionally.
Once you paid 3, then you should just have as many kids as possible.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and on the other side, we are going to switch the lens and look at this through the eyes of the younger generation, through us, and have a think about, or have a discussion about what we should be thinking about when it comes to the intergenerational wealth transfer. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Equity Mates. We are here with Dylan from Bold Wealth. A reminder, if you would like to speak to Dylan or any of our other advisors, head to equitymates.com/advice, and there'll be a form where you can put in your details and we'll put you in touch with Dylan. So Dylan, let's turn our attention to those that are receiving the wealth transfer. If we're in a lucky enough position to receive a gift or some form of inheritance, like where do you think, what is the best place that we should start? Like what should we be doing first off?
Going to equitymates.com.au/advice.
Finding an advisor.
Asking to speak to Dylan, particularly.
Like the first thing I say to everyone that I speak to when they receive an inheritance, whether it's an existing client, someone speaking to us for the first time, is just take a breath. Don't rush. This is an incredible opportunity that you have to set something up for yourself financially, and you have a plethora of things that you could do. So take a step back, think about the things that are important to you, think about your life, think about what, your goals are, and really put in place a financial plan for that money, because it is a gift. It's an amazing thing to be, bequeathed money. It's a wonderful thing, and it's going to get more and more common. So if you do the right thing with it, it'll just make your life significantly easier and better later on. So
don't blow it.
Don't buy a Lambo, unless it's like heaps. In which case,
unless it's a shitload. Have you ever signed off on a Lambo?
I've never signed off on a Lambo. I've signed off on like sports cars. Like not personally. I don't know lots of sports cars. But
it's funny that there are people who are willing to spend enough that they want to buy a sports car, but still so responsible that they need to ask their financial advisor before they buy a sports car.
But if that's one of their goals,
that's right.
Oh, that's true. That's true. Yeah, okay. But people come to you with that as a goal. One day I want to own a sports car.
It's usually something that does come out in your sort of initial strategy meetings and fact find meetings and things. And it's something that we put in place that's like if all your life you've had a dream of driving down the coast in, a convertible, I don't know, Ferrari or something like that.
Just rent it.
Yeah. Surely you say grow up.
No, don't grow up if that's your dream, but just lease it for a day or for a year.
Well, come in my car.
We obviously host an investing podcast. We're all about assets that appreciate in value.
I always tell people as well, though, if you're that into cars, do your research. Buy something that is going to stay high in value. So a really, really cool stat. It's something like 81% of Ferraris ever built are still on the road or roadworthy today.
Wow.
It's because they remain valuable and the asset transfers and is really easily resold. So they're assets as well. There's ways of doing this where you're not just going out and buying, whatever the newest Commodore is that goes fast, or they don't make Commodores anymore. Yes. There's a way of doing it so you're being smart with the asset as well.
So, all right, let's get away from cars. So someone's got an inheritance when grandparent or parent has passed away, or maybe they've got an early gift and the grandparent or parent is still there. First thing, do nothing. Like the lottery, don't tell anyone, do nothing. Get used to it.
Take yourself out for a croissant and a coffee and take a deep breath.
Second thing is go to equitymates.com/advice and speak to Dylan. But after those two things, what are some of the considerations people should, I guess, think about while they're making a plan? And where my mind goes are like tax considerations and stuff like that. Like, is there any, not strings attached to the money, but any potential things that people could trip up on when receiving that money?
Yeah. So the first thing to consider is, did you inherit cash, or were you gifted cash, or did you inherit assets? And what was the tax treatment of that asset whilst that person was still alive? So a really easy example to use is shares. So if you've inherited shares from someone, they have probably bought them at a different price to what they are today, and therefore will have either a capital gain or a capital loss associated with them. And hopefully those people have invested in a diverse portfolio of shares and they have multiple different versions of capital gain, and understanding what your net position is and what happens if you capitalize on that and sell those is really important. For example, you inherit $1 million of Commonwealth Bank stock. That person got them at IPO, or when just because they had a Commonwealth account, they got a bunch of stock, and so on and so forth, and now they're $180 or whatever they are today. If you sell those shares tomorrow and you're in the top marginal tax bracket already, chances are that from IPO price through to I'm surprised one of you hasn't shouted out what the IPO price was.
IPO price $5.40 a share.
There you go, $5.40
and it's now $179.
There you go, $179. So
we're just letting you cook, Dylan.
Let's say it's $175, right? So you get a 12-month discount on capital gain.
I was going to ask, does the capital gains discount survive?
It does. It does.
Yeah, okay,
so the asset has a purchase price. The transfer of ownership upon death isn't a capital gains event. It's not a change.
It's not like you have to hold it for 12 months.
No. But if you sell them immediately, you immediately will pay 47 cents on the dollar on 50% of that total gain.
Yeah.
So you potentially lose about 23.5% of your inheritance just by doing that. Now, whether or not you should sell your Commonwealth Bank stock, if you have such a considerable amount of one stock or not, is a different question. But if you want to then think about how you can maybe reduce that tax, maybe make some super contributions, maybe do a whole number of different things. There's lots of considerations before you just turn it into cash.
Yeah.
So shares are a really easy one. Think about the net position is what we would say. So what you receive has a dollar value on it, but what the net position is can completely change depending on how you plan to sell down that asset. Same with property. Although you can't sell property in units. So can't sell half a property in 1 year and then wait and sell the half the following year.
Until you can tokenize it on the blockchain.
That's right.
A separate conversation.
Soon.
Well, Dylan, we just want to close out with a couple of questions around structuring. When you're having conversations with clients, both, I guess, those looking to transfer and those transferees, what are some of the most effective structures that you're sort of recommending when thinking about sort of long-term wealth transfer?
When we think about the overall family, if we're talking about multi-generational wealth, so if we're very sure that we're going to pass on a significant amount of assets and we want that to continue to build, we will usually try and establish a vehicle or series of vehicles that multiple family members can be a part of before the time that those people pass away. So a really good example is a discretionary trust, where early on you can have, yourselves as the beneficiaries, but also you can have your kids, potentially their kids as well. And that trust can be something that can have transfer of trustee ownership and directors and things on the company. So another way is to set up a company structure. So potentially from that trust, you can set up it's often referred to as a bucket company, which I find really funny. Like, it just sounds like you're dodging tax. It's a bucket company where we're hiding our money. No, but you set up a company structure where money can be directed and you can build multi-generational assets in there. So a lot of our clients will have things like high income producing property, Australian share portfolios where you've got fully franked dividends and companies can receive the franking credits and reinvest those for an extended period of time. And then you can create multiple shareholders off the back of that company later on. So yeah, there's some really fun things you can do between how you put different assets into different places. But those two are a good example. One that we've talked about before as well, and it's probably the third one that gets, I guess, thrown around is like investment bonds. So investment bonds as a gifting strategy, where you specifically want to move money at a given point in time. That could be your death, it could be an age that somebody reaches, is an excellent way of setting up an investment that is going to be given to that person. And most importantly, they are not going to be in a position where they have to think about that net cost. that net position from that, because after 10 years, the capital gain on that investment is considered tax treated and the total balance is withdrawable.
Yeah.
Not only that, but you can gift that asset, it remains invested during the time that you're alive. So unlike shares, where if I, am 85 years old, if I sell $1 million worth of shares, or if there's $1 million capital gain, I'm taxed on that $1 million of income, obviously with capital gains discount. Whereas if I've done that early, set it up into an investment bond, and I go, cool, when I'm 85, everybody gets their money, and all of that's tax treated.
What's the cost base? Like, let's say you do that, and then like the child inherits the assets in the education bond, but then like they withdraw the assets from the education bond and they're just held in their personal name, but they're tax treated. Is the cost base like the price the day you withdraw it?
So the asset remains within the bond. When you withdraw, it's cash.
Oh, okay.
But what happens is you have something called a future transfer of ownership, or a future event transfer, and the actual bond changes owner. And that's not a capital gains event.
Okay. So you can never just withdraw it like the asset from
No,
the bond.
so if you've got an
have to cash it
underlying
out, share
Vanguard,
portfolio.
say you've got an underlying Vanguard fund in there, you can't withdraw that and then own the Vanguard fund. Also, why would you?
Yeah, true. You could, but if you wanted to own the Vanguard fund, you could just sell it through the bond.
You just withdraw it from the bond as cash and then buy the Vanguard asset directly. But at that point, you've got this asset that you can withdraw from freely without tax. It can continue to compound as much as you like. So there's additional complexities with those bonds. You can't contribute to them if there hasn't been contributions and all these other rules. It's a little bit more complicated. You can obviously go on and find the bond providers yourself, speak to your advisor about it, because it is a bit of a minefield in setting them up correctly.
Yeah, there's a lot of rules.
There's heaps of rules. Yeah. They're really, really beneficial when you use them to their advantage. And that's like a lot of investments, right? Like, don't invest in things that you don't understand.
Well, discretionary trusts, bucket companies, education bonds. If your head's spinning a little bit, go to equitymates.com/advice, ask to speak to Dylan, and we'll put you in touch. But Dylan, to close it out, for those listening who are now starting to think about the great wealth transfer coming, starting to think about their family situation, be they the parent or the child in this conversation, what's the first step you think everyone should take after putting the headphones down and leaving this episode?
Just have the conversation. So whether you're going upwards to your parents or your parents and you want to talk to your kids about, your wealth, get over that mental hurdle of the taboo of, money that we have in Australia. It's globally, but we have a very strong one in Australia. But have that conversation, talk about that financial position, and just be open and honest about the things that are important to you. If it's helpful, get your accountant involved, get your advisor involved, use them as a scapegoat. Our advisor was telling us that we need to have better conversations with our parents, or our advisor was saying that we need to get our kids involved in our financial planning meetings, because it is a large amount of money that's going to be transferred. And if we don't think about it, it's just money that goes to tax, it's money that gets left on the table, or it's money that gets spent on and not invested. So,
And if you don't have an advisor and you're looking for someone to blame Dylan. Say, an advisor I heard on Equity Mates told me to start the conversation.
I was listening to this advisor and he said, I had to talk to you about how much money you're going to give me.
Well, I think that's a good place to leave it, Dylan. We appreciate you coming on as always, and we look forward to getting you on again with a new case study next time.
King of case studies. Thanks for having me, boys.
Thanks, Dylan.
I will say this about investing. Everything you do learn is cumulative. What I learned at 20 is useful.